Before I proceed any further, I crave leave to extend my most cordial, heartfelt, respectful and sincere condolence to the victims of recent floods which are caused by stormy weather and flash flooding, including typhoons, especially in countries including the Philippines and other East Asian countries. Today, Sunday, the 9th of November of the current Gregorian year 2025, is considered to be the Remembrance Sunday, particularly in countries and states which once upon a time were ruled by the government of the United Kingdom of Great Britain, and earlier Ireland, later the Northern Ireland. Many of such countries have become independent. Even our own country declared herself independent of the British rule on August the 15th of the Gregorian year 1947, followed by the Indian Republic Day of the 26th of January 1950. But this particular day, known as Remembrance Sunday, is still solemnized by various countries belonging to the Commonwealth, of which call themselves the members of the Commonwealth. Before proceeding any further on this particular issue, I crave leave to clarify a few things. After the First World War, which began as early as in 1914 and ended officially in the year 1918, it was decided that the 11th of November would be considered to be the day on which the so-called the fallen soldiers would be remembered and honored. Currently, this particular day, the 11th of November, is considered to be the Armistice Day, perhaps I'm mispronouncing the name, and it is still honored. But after the Second World War, which began officially as early as in the year 1949, I beg your pardon, 1939, and ended officially in the year 1945, it was decided that the nearest Sunday to the 11th of November would be considered the Remembrance Sunday, as it happened on this very day in our country and in various other countries belonging to the Commonwealth. On this day, many of us are accustomed to lay wreaths in honor of those who sacrificed themselves in order to grant us the liberty and most certainly the very possibility of our living on while they died for our sake. During the First World War, millions of people died, as it happened during the Second World War. But the First World War was considered to be absolutely gruesome due to the sufferings of the people which brought about, not merely in Central Europe, which was triggered by the death of Prince Ferdinand of the Imperial Austria of those days, but also in various other countries. People were called to serve in the cause of humanity to ensure that those people who declared war against the innocent nations should not and would not prevail. My late grandfather was one of them who was called to serve, and according to certain sources, he was also captured and detained briefly by the subordinated soldiers of late Emperor Wilhelm II of Germany. Since, however, he was not a fighting soldier but a physician, as his task was not to kill, but to heal and to save, he was released. But alas, many of his colleagues were not, and they died very bitter deaths, even in the harsh winter, or I should say winters in plural, of Europe during those 4 long years. In fact, people ought to have learned a good lesson during the course of the First World War. How any war can be vicious per se by its very nature. Alas, only a few years later it was discovered that the people of certain groups belonging to certain countries failed to recognize this fact. When a certain individual was elected in the year 1933, even his own countrymen and those who elected him in the neighboring country could not anticipate the danger which was to befall. I'm referring to none other than Adolf Schicklgruber, more widely known as Adolf Hitler, who was elected democratically, even to be the Chancellor, or Kanzler as they call it in German, of the Reichstag. But the same democratically elected person became one of the most notorious and vicious dictators of the recent history. His ambition was too grave to contemplate by most of us. All he knew was to increase his own power at the cost of the innocent. This day, the Remembrance Sunday, we may forget those dictators who possessed the vicious nature of enslaving others, but it becomes our inevitable and absolute duty to remember those who sacrificed themselves for our sake. those who were called to the battlefields to fight those bitter wars had a dream. Their dream was to see us being freed from tyranny, free from dictatorial viciousness, free from inhumanity, free from self-indulgence. They expected us to lead a life following their own example of living for others and sacrificing ourselves for the sake of those who could not defend themselves. I ask on this very day, have we truly learned that lesson? Have we truly come far enough to recognize the vicious nature of any war? Have we truly forgotten that in any war we have nothing to gain, because the individuals whom we lose in the battles are lost forever, at least on this earth, befitting their earthly living and earthly lives? Have we truly forgotten that the loss of a single human being belonging to our own group, our own country, our own nation is also a loss? Have we forgotten that we belong to the most supreme race, which is called human beings, created in the very image of our Creator, even as described in the first 2 chapters of the book of Genesis, belonging to the sacred Torah, or the Holy Bible, or the Old Testament of the Holy Bible? Why have we forgotten this? That when we kill others, we degrade our own selves. We degrade our own race, the race known as human race, the most superior race of all. Why have we forgotten that it is our duty to come forward and protect the weak, even the most feeble, the poorest of the poor, the most helpless ones, the weakest of the weak, the feeblest of the feeble, and those who are often considered to be forgotten by many, if not most of us. True heroism does not lie in destruction of others, but in protection of the weak. True victory is not in destroying others, but in protecting others. Remembering that we belong to one and that ultimate race, created in the image of God the Almighty, even in the Garden of Eden, according to the sacred Torah or the Holy Bible, and being created in His image, we own His nature, which means to protect His most desirable and most loving creation, the human race. This is our duty, that we should come forward to protect the feeble and the weak. Wars bring only destruction and devastation, making too many of our fellow global citizens totally helpless. Too many people lose their parents and become orphans. Too many elderly people lose their children and despair. Too many women lose their husbands and mourn. And alas, too many of them become slaves of others, because they often find themselves in no better situation than to sell themselves or even be hunted, if I may use the expression, in speech marks or in inverted commas, by the greedy human traffickers, who, raising false hopes upon their minds, traffic them far away from their native places and sell them into human slavery, even into utter immorality. I am merely a fellow human being of all of you, my fellow global citizens, whom I owe both regards and respect. I beg you most humbly, with all due respect on my part, to consider and reconsider this fact. What do we truly gain in prosecuting wars upon the weak and the feeble, even letting them starve to death by blocking passage or passages which enable them to receive food, drinking water, medications, and help based upon service of humanity. Craving leave to raise these questions upon your mind as well as my own mind, I bid you a very solemn night, crossing from the 9th of November into the 10th of November in our country. Good night. God bless. May God the Almighty protect our race, the human race, and grant us the absolutely needful wisdom to recognize the fact that we gain nothing by destroying the feeble and the weak, but our heroism lies truly in protecting them. Thank you once again, and bid you a very solemn night.